I didn't use the word hope that much when I was a Protestant Christian. I talked about faith and love. I didn't use hope as much as I used eternal security. Mm-hmm. Now, what's the difference between this proof, this substance, and what our Protestant brothers and sisters think of as eternal security for the future?
Yeah. Here's, I think, to understand some of this difference, what Catholics and Protestants are dealing with are two worldviews and two views of the human person in particular. One of the things that is almost trite, but it is relevant to this discussion. You know, Martin Luther taught that you're justified by faith alone, by grace alone, right? Mm-hmm. And what that means is that your human free will is so thoroughly bad. As a matter of fact, in the mouth of John Calvin, when pushed by Jesuits, in fact, to the argument, he came up with the idea, and so did actually people after him, of total depravity of the free will. It is totally depraved, incapable of anything good at all. Luther was moving in that direction, but he didn't put it quite as strongly. But Calvin made it clear. That means that you cannot make a decision for Christ. John Calvin would never accept somebody like Billy Graham as a Christian who taught orthodoxy. Billy Graham is too Catholic for Calvin. Billy Graham teaches that you have to make a decision for Christ. He's been teaching that at revivals for decades and decades. And that whole message of making a decision for Christ is what you can't do, because your will is, can't do anything. Grace comes in alone, without your free will. That's the alone part, without your free will. And grace makes you accept the gift of faith. And then it's by that faith alone that you're saved, that came to you by grace. Now, Catholics believe that grace comes to us by faith. Absolutely. Again, it's a theological virtue. We've always taught that. But it's not faith alone. It's part of a relationship with you and God, and your will is fallen, but not totally depraved. And so you can say yes. Now, if the will is totally depraved, then it can't really be undone. All that can happen is it can be covered over. And that's a common image that's used, that grace covers you like snow covering the dung heap. I lived in Bavaria for a while, and I understood that image so well, because these Bavarian farmers would have a stone box outside their barn, and it would be filled with cow dung. And Luther mentioned, too, how that would be a sign of pride, but it's also a good image of the material things we're proud of. Our riches are like dung. But it meant that you had a lot of cows and big fields to fertilize. But snow could cover it over. And I lived there in May, and it was still snowing every day. And so it would cover it over, and then it would melt later in the afternoon, and then it was just a pile that was wet and smelly instead of just cold and smelly. So it was, that made it worse. But underneath it was still dung under the snow. That's what Luther is trying to say. You're still corrupted, or as Calvin said, depraved, but the grace covers you over. The Catholic mentality is that this hypostasis, this reality, this substance of that we have our hope in, and this proof that we have actually changes us. There is an internal change, so that it's as if God plants roses in the cow dung, and roses are able to transform the fertilizing dung into sweet-smelling roses. And this is the difference, that there's a substantive transformation of our personality. We put on Christ, to be sure. That's an image that's used in Galatians chapter 3. But we also grow up in him. In Ephesians 4 especially, we see how we become more transformed by Christ. And it's that transformation that the things we hope for has going on for us. That's what's key as a different worldview. And we believe that we have free will, not just to choose which sin we're going to choose. We have free will to choose sin or we can also say yes to God's grace. God's grace is more powerful, and we are absolutely dependent on His grace for salvation, for this faith, for this hope. But it's also going to be a grace that doesn't just cover us over in what Luther and Calvin both speak of as a certain type of legal fiction. It's rather a complete change of our personalities.
All right. Thank you, Father. Excellent.